From Quito, Ecuador, my name is Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South, the morning news brief on Telesur English. We start this new edition right now. We begin in Venezuela, where President Nicolás Maduro says a terrorist group dismantled on Monday was part of a wider conspiracy with plans to explode a bomb at the embassy of an allied country in Caracas. 2 policemen and several members of the armed cell were killed in the operation outside Caracas.
Unfortunately, with 2 professional policemen dead. When they were resting, waiting to deliver these terrorists, they were killed with shots on their head, both of them. And they left 6 Bolivarian policemen seriously wounded, who are very seriously wounded, and the command groups had to act. They defeated one part of the terrorist group, the others are arrested, more than 5, that are giving testimony and telling everything.
5 members of what Maduro called the terrorist cell were arrested in the shootout, which lasted several hours. It is still not clear what happened to the former police helicopter pilot, Oscar Pérez, who was apparently the leader of the group. Pérez had stolen a helicopter last year and dropped grenades on government buildings. After 6 months on the run, the police tracked him and his associates down to a house in the hillside neighborhood of El Junquito. President Maduro made those comments at the end of his annual address to the nation. He delivered it before the National Constituent Assembly. The address focused on a message of peace and respect, with the president saying he desires a debate of ideas and tolerance, and adding that the Constituent Assembly is an opportunity to reinvent the revolution.
So 2007 is also marked as a heroic year, the year in which awareness returned, the majority strength of the revolution returned in the course of the struggles, in the course of the difficulties. A true revolution shows its reasons for being if it's able to confront the worst difficulties, the most difficult tests, and to overcome those.
The Venezuelan popular assemblies are continuing their debates towards building the Bolivarian government's plan for the years 2019 to 2025. We have more details in the next report.
The Ali Park in Caracas is the main location where environmental and eco-socialist movements are debating the future government plan to continue the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela.
We are not only debating on the government's administration plan, we are writing a plan for the transformation of our homeland, and it is crucial to incorporate people in this, because in order to construct a successful government program, we need the voice, the will, and the proposals of the Bolivarian Chavist and revolutionary people who want a better future for all of us.
One of the main points of debate is the historic 5th objective proposed by former President Hugo Chavez, which sought to preserve life on the planet through an eco-socialist productive model.
In this new community planning process, we cannot hide that some objectives from the first socialist plan were not fulfilled, and we need to discuss it and analyze it, especially the 5th objective, which focused on life preservation on the planet. We are committed to environmental movements to achieve and promote this objective.
There are activists who propose to establish environmental courts, water protection committees, and waste educational programs. The exploitation of the mining arc of the Orinoco is still under discussion.
It is looking at extractivism as a way to ensure the continuity of the revolution. If the empire defeats our revolution, Mother Earth will be destroyed. President Maduro is the one who signed the mining arc decree, which represents 10% of the national territory. Last year, he signed the Cara National Park decree, which protects 8% of the territory, and all the gold, oil, coltan, and diamonds that are underneath the protected territory will be never exploited. It is the second biggest national park in the world and the greatest oxygen reservoir of the planet.
In only 8 days, around 2 million people have participated in the community assemblies.
Pope Francis is to hold an outdoor mass in the Chilean capital Santiago on the first full day of his visit to the country. There's a celebration expected to attract more than 500,000 people. On Monday evening, Pope Francis was welcomed by Chilean President Michelle Bachelet at Santiago International. Children, senior members of the church, and other state officials also greeted the Pope, who was then driven through Santiago Street in his Pope mobile. Hundreds of people turned out to see him, but along with the joy of many believers, some were also critical.
The fact that he chose us to come to our country, it's a big deal. We are already blessed by the Pope, and to have him here is a big deal.
A lot of us have been Catholics. We were part of the church. However, we feel we were let down by the Roman Curia, in the sense that it is an abusive, discriminatory, and intolerant church, and we do not accept that state money is being used for a visit that is dressed up to be a religious event, when in reality it's a state visit. In this case, the Vatican State.
The police arrested some protesters dressed as nuns after demonstrators denounced the expense of the Pope's visit and the Chilean church involvement in sexual abuse scandals. The Catholic Church's popularity in Chile is the lowest in Latin America, and many see it as a pillar of the conservative establishment.
Pope Francis, who said there will be zero tolerance in sex abuse case in the church, named Bishop Juan Barros, who had been accused of covering up the biggest pedophile of the Chilean church history, and following the reaction of rejection from the community and from the clergy, he called us idiots.
We are here because we are interested in the Pope's visit. We firmly believe that he is an historical character in the history of our Catholic popes. We are very happy for him to be among us. We also believe that this is a huge opportunity to tell him what's happening in our church with our hierarchy, which each day identifies itself more with power and less with the poor.
A Chilean court put Mapuche leader Francisca Linconao under house arrest, just days ahead of Pope Francis' visit. The Mapuche leader had voiced hopes to meet with Pope Francis during his visit to the Araucanía region, saying she wanted to let him know about the plight of the indigenous people. Linconao, one of the 11 Mapuche community members acquitted for a 2013 double homicide, fled to Bolivia in search of asylum. Chile's Court of Appeal has now ordered a retrial of the case. And preparations for Pope Francis' arrival in Peru are underway. Security officials conducted simulated emergency exercises at the Pope's outdoor mass location. They have also organized motorcades that will escort the Pope mobile as it drives through the streets of Lima. Pope Francis will arrive in the capital city on January 18. He will also visit Puerto Maldonado and Trujillo. Peru's former president Alberto Fujimori, who was recently pardoned, was back in the hospital on Sunday. According to his doctors, he had an arrhythmia. Fujimori had been at the hospital until he was given a humanitarian pardon by President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. The 79-year-old was imprisoned for human rights crimes and corruption committed during his government, which lasted from 1990 through 2000. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. This Tuesday marks 2 years since the Argentinian activist, lawmaker, and indigenous leader Milagro Salas was imprisoned. Her supporters say the accusations against her were invented after she organized protests against the national and provisional governments. Our correspondent Sabrina Roth has more.
Este martes, la diputada del Palasur, Milagro Salas, cumple 2 años.
This Tuesday, the member of Palasur, Milagro Salas, will complete 2 years under arbitrary arrest, according to several bodies of the Inter-American System for Human Rights, such as the Working Group for Arbitrary Arrest, the CIDH, the OAS, and many other organizations that have issued statements on her case. Many activities are planned for today. The first one will be in Buenos Aires at 9 a.m., which is a march from the obelisk to the offices of Jujuy provincial government. Also in the province of Jujuy, various members of the Milagro Salas Freedom Committee are planning to visit the imprisoned social leader. Let's remember that so far the government has failed not only to fulfill the resolution of the Inter-American Court for Human Rights, but the court in Jujuy has also failed to carry out what the National Court of Justice decree, which was that Salas be allowed house arrest at her own house.
That was Sabrina Roth from Buenos Aires. The Argentine government has created a commission to investigate the disappearance of Submarine Ara San Juan on November 15, 2017. The commission will be responsible for investigating the reasons for the disappearance of the submarine, which had 44 crew members on board. It will also request testimonies from public officials and examine the involvement of the Argentine Navy and defense authorities on the rescue operations. Guatemalan President Jimmy Morales has completed his 2nd year, and amid complaints he hasn't fulfilled his campaign promises. On Sunday, he delivered his annual report while facing protests and questions.
Police and military surrounded Congress as President Jimmy Morales delivered the 2nd government report of his presidency. Security forces did not allow protesters inside the building to express their dissatisfaction with this government. The demonstrators blamed the government for political crisis and tragedies like the fire at a state-run orphanage.
We can't feed our children. Salaries are too low. We face violence and instability. The girls from the safe home were burned alive, 51 of them. And he's spending millions on marketing. It's just not fair.
The scene inside Congress was the complete opposite. President Morales presented his report without facing any opposition. He claimed Guatemala has thrived thanks to the order he established.
I want to remind all of you that the country we received was in disastrous conditions. We needed to clean house in financial, administrative, and political matters. We achieved this thanks to the order established in 2016, and we saw the results over the past year.
President Morales' claims stand in contrast to reality. In the last year, 111 children died from chronic malnutrition. The country's human rights attorney say there has been no major victory facing this pandemic.
Chronic malnutrition is a crucial issue. It's disheartening that children continue to die in Guatemala because there is no food available. Another issue is healthcare, which must be developed so it's available for all citizens.
President Morales kicks off his 3rd year in office facing social pressure and legal battles. His son and brother are facing corruption charges. The president is also awaiting a decision from the Constitutional Court surrounding charges he received bribes from the army.
At least 10 workers died on Monday in Colombia when a bridge collapsed on the road that connects Bogotá with the city of Villavicencio. Another 8 workers suffered injuries from this incident. According to the coordinator of the National Unit for Disaster Risk Management, the bridge collapsed suddenly when there were about 20 workers at the site. The victims were welders who were in the lower part of the viaduct, located 65 kilometers from the capital. On a visit to Colombia, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said his organization supports the peace process between the government and the ELN. Guterres met with former FARC members and victims of the armed conflict as he highlighted the importance of resuming the peace talks in Quito, Ecuador. The Secretary General is said to be concerned about the recent military attacks that made the Colombian government withdraw its team from the negotiations.
I express my deep concern following the violent events of the last few days and the possible escalation of the clashes that is detrimental to the political process and the situation of the communities in conflict-affected areas. It is absolutely necessary to speed up the process of placing an active state presence in the entire national territory.
Our correspondent Lorena Hoyos has more details on the next report.
The official visit from Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, has finished. He was in the country for 2 days and he met with President Santos, the Catholic Church, members of the civil society, and also with leaders of the political party FARC. He talked about 2 important topics during his visit. One of them was how the implementation of the peace agreement with the FARC is advancing. He stated that several groups he met are concerned about the delays and also about changes to what was agreed in Havana. Guterres was also worried about the violence in some territories, like the murder of social leaders and the insecurity. He said that it's vital that the Colombian state take care of the territories left by FARC in terms of health and education. Guterres encouraged the government and the ELN to resume the peace dialogue in Quito and to agree on a new ceasefire. He even said that he talked with the UN representative in Colombia to help as mediator in this dialogue. The government hasn't made a statement yet, but the ELN declared on their Twitter account that they are waiting for the government to resume the dialogue and begin another ceasefire. In other news, the judges of the Special Peace Jurisdiction were sworn in several sectors have warned that it's necessary for the JEP to start working as soon as possible to establish how the transitional justice will take place. They're also waiting to see what the Constitutional Court will do about the statutory law approved by the Congress recently and other laws approved unconstitutionally, like constraints that were imposed on human rights activists that were chosen as judges on the JEP. That is all for now. We will keep you updated.
That was Lorena Hoyos from Bogota. A 10% increase in public transport prices takes effect today in Paraguay. Economists have warned this will affect people's lives since it would lead to rising prices for basic household goods. Citizens have rejected the government's decision. Our correspondent in Asunción has all the details.
Experts say public transport prices should have been raised by only 4%. Such a decision comes from analyzing workers' salaries, the dollar exchange rate for repairs, and finally gas prices.
The impact of diesel prices, which is what conventional buses with no air conditioning use, does not surpass 35%. Therefore, taking the impact as it is, as a whole, the increase is of 4%.
This measure, taken by President Horacio Cartes's government, will negatively impact Paraguay's economy. Economists believe this price hike will lead to an increase in prices for basic household goods.
It's a chain reaction which leads to a rise in prices, and this will strongly affect the people, since their salaries are not flexible. There's no pay increase for workers. The economy in general is at a low point. People have debt and families who depend on them.
People have taken to the streets to oppose the price hike. For their part, worker unions announced that they will demand a pay increase and are considering calling for a strike.
It's a shame that fares are increasing. A shame because this always leads to food getting more expensive. And our salaries never catch up.
This increase hurts Paraguay's working class the most, which is currently facing the worst unemployment rates of the past 12 years, according to the General Administration of Statistics, Surveys, and Census of Paraguay.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Hundreds of people have marched in front of U.S. President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach against his offensive definition of Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries on Monday. Several demonstrators were Haitians living in the United States, holding Haitian flags and signs. Trump was spending the day, also Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day, at the West Palm Beach Golf Resort. Across the street from the demonstrators, a group of Trump supporters also convened to see President's passing motorcade.
sure our voice is being heard. So everybody that's out here is doing something because we all want to be, we do not want to be disrespected.
Now let's have a look at some other news making headlines from around the world.
Clashes between protesters and police forces in Greece amid anti-austerity demonstrations have taken place in Athens. Protesters threw stones and pieces of marble at police officers who deployed tear gas to disperse the crowd. Demonstrators are marching against austerity measures due to be voted on next week. Unions say that the changes to the 36-year-old industrial action law is only the first step in ongoing EU-IMF efforts to limit strikes. Bangladesh has agreed to a time frame with Myanmar for repatriating hundreds of thousands of Rohingya who fled an army crackdown last year. Myanmar has agreed to accept 1,500 Rohingya every week and that it aims to return all of them to Myanmar within 2 years. Over 650,000 Rohingya have fled to neighboring Bangladesh since violence erupted in Rakhine state in August. At least 14 students and a teacher were injured after a knife fight broke out in a school in the Russian city of Perm. The victims were slashed when they tried to separate two teenage boys who were fighting. 2 suspects were detained by police and the incident is being treated as attempted murder. The teacher and a 16-year-old are in hospital with serious neck wounds.
2 guys in masks ran into the classroom, slashed the teacher, and started slashing the children. Then one of them ran away and jumped from the 2nd floor. The second was running around, slashing others, and then himself.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has arrived in India for a 6-day visit with the intention of strengthening bilateral relations. But hundreds of protesters in the capital city of New Delhi have denounced his visit and organized a pro-Palestinian march. The Philippines' most active volcano, Mayon, on the island of Luzon, has begun erupting, forcing thousands to flee the island. More than 12,000 people have been ordered to leave a 7-kilometer danger zone around the crater as officials warned them of potentially destructive mud flows and toxic clouds.
16-year-old Palestinian Ahed Tamimi, accused of assaulting Israeli soldiers, has had her detention extended in an Israel military court. Ahed Tamimi and her mother were arrested on December 19th, 3 days after she was filmed hitting a soldier at the entrance to her family home in a village in the occupied West Bank. Tamimi's lawyer, Gabi Lasky, said she requested the court to release her, who has been held illegally for almost 3 weeks.
Well, we're here today because the prosecution has requested to keep Ahed and her mother Nariman in detention until the end of the trial. And of course, we are against that request, and we're going to present a lot of decisions from the courts, mostly in Israel, regarding settlers that under more severe circumstances were released or never asked to be detained until the end of the trial.
The second day of the PLO meeting has been taking place in Ramallah. Our correspondent Nur Harasin has the details.
It is the second day of the PLO's cabinet meeting in Ramallah today, with the absence of both Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. Palestinian officials from Fatah and from the PLO said to news agencies today that it is final that the Palestinian state will be heading to the UN and that they will be asking for a full membership for the Palestinian state. Meanwhile, here in the Gaza Strip, in several statements, Hamas and the Islamic Jihad have said that they will not be taking part in this cabinet meeting because they do think that resistance and armed resistance is the only way to liberate the Palestinian land, despite all the peace negotiations and the efforts from the Arab League and the countries around the world to solve the problem of the Palestinian cause, and also to negotiate what was happening after Donald Trump decided to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Nur Harasin from Gaza. Heavy clashes broke out in the Libyan capital of Tripoli on Monday, leaving at least 20 people dead. The Mitiga airport, which operates all civilian air traffic, has also suspended all national and international flights until further notice. Violence erupted after a militia group in charge of security said it had been attacked. Libya had been controlled by different armed groups since a 2011 uprising that toppled leader Muammar Gaddafi. Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy announced on Monday that Madrid will continue to run Catalonia's government if former leader Carles Puigdemont is voted regional president by the Catalan parliament. Carles Puigdemont's party won the most votes on December 21st regional elections among the separatist parties, which together have a slim majority over pro-unity parties. Puigdemont's supporters argue that voters have elected him and he should be able to rule from Brussels. In Barcelona, the center-right Democratic Convergence of Catalonia, or CDC, has been ordered to repay more than $8 million for an illegal scheme. Joan Ortiz tells us more from Barcelona.
¿Qué tal, compañeros? Saludos desde Barcelona.
We are in front of the Provincial Court of Barcelona, where a huge number of media groups gathered this morning to hear the sentence in the Palace of Music case, known here as the Palau case. Félix Millet, the auditorium's former president, was sentenced to almost 10 years in prison. His right-hand man, Jordi Montul, was given 7.5 years. They were in charge of the Catalan Palace of Music, a big and beloved institution in Catalonia that promotes local music. They illegally pocketed 23 million euros from this cultural organization between 1999 and 2009. But the issue is even bigger because one of the sponsors of Palace of Music is Ferrovial, a large public works company in Spain. Ferrovial had been funneling money through the Palace of Music for the political party Democratic Convergence. In exchange, the party would award public work contracts to Ferrovial. In today's sentencing, the treasurer of Democratic Convergence was given a 4-year term in prison. No one from Ferrovial received the sentence because the crimes for which they were accused had already passed the statute of limitations. The sentences come at a crucial time for the establishment of the Catalan parliament. The exiled leader, Carles Puigdemont, who is now in Brussels, wants to regain control of Catalonia, despite protests from Spain. Puigdemont is a member of PDeCAT, a political group which was born from the cleanup of the Catalan Democratic Convergence Party. Puigdemont clamped down on corruption and removed all members implicated in any corruption case. The party is seen as key in Catalan's independentist process and is one of the most supported in the region.
That was Joan Ortiz from Barcelona. And with this, we've come to the end of this morning news brief. This and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.